I knew something reeked the moment I walked into that conference room and saw the HR rep sitting there with her lips pressed so tight they could have sliced deli meat. No, hey, how was your weekend? No, can we chat a sec? Just a thick manila envelope with my name misspelled, and the COO leaning back in his ergonomic throne like he was about to offer me a gluten-free muffin instead of pink slip. Don't get emotional, he said, like I'd just stubbed my toe and not been fired 3 days before the Series C audit I designed. His smile was the kind of corporate smug you only get from someone who thinks Slack DMs are invisible and passwords are magic words. I smiled back. Not big, not bitter. Just a little upturn at the corner like the beginning of a slow exhale. That's when he should have known he'd just kicked a hornet's nest wearing barbecue sauce shoes. But he didn't, because men like Brent, yep, Brent, of course, think consequences are for interns and that policies are just decorative screensavers. I handed over my badge, logged out of the company laptop, and nodded like a good little ex-employee. But what I didn't hand over, my leverage. See, Brent forgot one tiny, microscopic, legally terrifying detail. I built the risk architecture he's been shortcutting. Every bypass, every approved exception, every midnight override. That was my code, my rules, my net. And what a tangled little net it was. Side note, since you're still here and didn't swipe to some guy ranting about crypto and protein powder, 97% of people listen to these stories without subscribing. I get it. But if you're enjoying this and want to see how far Brent Smirk slides down his neck, hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really helps the team keep making these dumpster fires feel cinematic. Back to Brent, the man who thought Excel macros counted as innovation. Now, I'm not new to the game. I've sat through more agile workflow syncs than anyone should have to endure in one lifetime. I know what it looks like when an exec is trying to wipe fingerprints off a dirty project, and Brent was practically Windex in human form. He'd been quietly pushing through efficiency protocols since the day he arrived, usually around 2:33 o'clock a.m. when the only folks awake were caffeine-addled engineers and his own ambition. But here's the kicker. He never asked how the system worked. He just assumed it bent when he said bend. What he didn't know was that the system bent for me, and only because I programmed it to scream every time someone like him tried to tiptoe around compliance like a raccoon in a recycling bin. I walked out of that room calm, composed, still holding a copy of my offboarding checklist like it was a CVS receipt of corporate idiocy. The door clicked shut behind me and my phone buzzed, not from anyone at work, just an old alert buried deep in a sandbox node I'd forgotten to reroute. My admin key had just been used after my departure had been logged and confirmed. Timestamp, 3:04 a.m., and that was when I stopped being angry, and I started getting procedural. I didn't take the job for glory. Hell, I didn't even take it for the money, though back then the stock options looked shinier than a raccoon's fever dream. I took it because I'm the kind of person who likes building things no one ever notices until they fall apart. And compliance? Compliance is the invisible duct tape holding corporate dreams together just long enough to get them funded. 5 years ago, when I joined, our compliance department was basically a sweaty intern and a Google Doc labeled security stuff. I rebuilt it from the server up, structured the audits, designed the workflows, wrote custom scripts to flag risk events, and automated the hell out of what used to be a paper-chasing nightmare. Every access request, every override, every just this once exception got quietly logged and filed. You wanted to bend a rule? Fine. But my system made sure the bend left a bruise. I even named it Project Mimir, after the Norse god of wisdom, because I remembered everything, even when the execs forgot. Then Brent arrived. Brent, with his MBA from somewhere warm and his obsession with cutting through red tape. Brent, who used phrases like fail fast and compliance is a growth bottleneck. Brent, who saw the risk team as glorified speed bumps on his race to IPO glory. He had this pattern. He wouldn't touch anything during work hours. Too many eyes, but around 2 or 3 in the morning, that's when he'd strike. Quiet little access changes. Quick Slack messages to engineering managers like, let's just push this through for now. Legal can bless it later. No tickets, no emails, just his word and a whole lot of risk. I flagged him the first month. A 1:47 a.m. credential override that got approved with a shrug by a half-asleep infrastructure lead. The approval wasn't even logged in our system, just a Slack reaction emoji. I brought it up in a meeting and he chuckled. We need to be nimble, not bureaucratic. Then he called me a hall monitor with a keyboard in front of the CTO. That was the moment it changed, when I stopped trying to warn them and started documenting everything. I created a secondary logging sandbox, isolated, invisible, encrypted twice. It lived off the mainframe, fed by shadow copies of the primary logs. I wasn't allowed to keep it technically, but nobody was watching. They trusted me. I didn't keep it out of spite. I kept it because I knew one day someone would try to rewrite history. And Brent was already holding the Sharpie. Every executive override he made, even the ones that never made it into the main system, got mirrored into my sandbox. Every time he authorized a workaround with a Slack thumbs up, I scraped it, timestamped it, and buried it in an immutable log chain. because verbal approvals are great until someone gets sued. You know what really gets me? It wasn't just the risk, it was the arrogance. He didn't even ask how the system worked. He just assumed compliance was a toggle you could flip when it got in the way of your bonus. He never asked who wrote the risk engine, who linked the logs to access control, who tied login events to biometric tags. He thought it all just happened, like air conditioning or coffee refills. But Mimir remembered, and so did I. By the time Brent fired me, his digital trail looked like a drunk raccoon tap dancing through a minefield, and he had no idea. Because here's the thing about ghosts and machines: we don't rattle chains, we don't slam doors, we just watch and wait and log everything. 2 days after the firing, I was sitting on my couch in pajamas that had forgotten what soap smelled like, halfway through a pity binge of boxed wine and expired Thin Mints when it happened. Ping, my phone buzzed. Thought it was a spam notification. Maybe another your resume matches a dog grooming job in Tulsa. Alert from the job board hellscape. But no, it was an auto-forward from a private proton mail I hadn't touched since college. One I'd routed through a relay node off the primary system, back when I was testing Mimir's alert redundancy. Completely forgotten. Subject line, admin access key usage priority flag timestamp, 3:04 a.m. Credential mine. I stared at the screen for a good 5 seconds like it had just insulted my mother. My hands froze halfway to a stale cookie. Because let me be clear, I was gone, offboarded, access revoked. Badge turned in, laptop wiped. I'd signed the stupid form that said I'd returned all company property including knowledge assets, which is corporate speak for go die quietly. So how, in the name of broken firewalls and corporate idiocy, was my admin key being used? The only answer, Brent. He hadn't just cut me out, he'd used my departure as camouflage. Somewhere between firing me and prepping for the audit, he decided it was easier to reuse my credentials than request his own elevated access. Classic Brent. Always wants the throne, never wants the receipts. I sat there, jaw clenched, as the cold disbelief curdled into something sharper. Because this wasn't just sloppy, it was stupid. And when stupid meets audited, that's when things get interesting. See, I'd buried more than just logs in that sandbox. Mimir didn't just track overrides, it tracked how they were accessed. Credentials, IPs, timestamps. Even biometric echoes from login terminals if they were active. That's how I designed it, like a paranoid squirrel building a nuclear bunker for acorns. I opened the old terminal on my personal machine, took a deep breath, and re-engaged Mimir's sandbox monitor. The screen lit up with pings, silent flags tripping like dominoes. He wasn't just accessing files. He was crawling through the guts of the system, flipping off safeguards, retro-approving changes, and even poking around in audit prep folders like he was rearranging a crime scene. Using my key, like it would absorb the blast if something exploded. For about a second, I considered calling legal, flagging it, going by the book. But then I remembered. Brent shredded the book and fired the author, so I watched, and logged, and let the violations stack up like greasy plates in a college sink. Every change he made triggered silent alerts. Every time he faked a security exception or greenlit a permission upgrade without backup logs, ping, ping, ping. He thought he was cleaning house before the auditors came. What he was really doing was digging a tunnel straight into a digital landmine I'd buried years ago, one with his name carved into every byte. The thing about audits, they're not designed to find things. They're designed to verify that no one was dumb enough to leave fingerprints. But if you plant the right breadcrumb, just one innocuous little log discrepancy, timestamp just so, an auditor will follow it. And once they do, they find everything. I didn't need to lift a finger. Brent was doing it for me. Here's the part Brent really should have read the manual on, assuming he ever read anything that didn't have a golf metaphor or his own name in bold font. Most systems, if you look hard enough, have backdoors. Some are left by lazy developers. Some are installed by malicious insiders. But the ones I built, they were fake, not backdoors, more like bait. I called them dummy protocols, sandboxed bypass routes I embedded during system buildouts. Meant strictly for one purpose, training auditors. They simulated vulnerabilities without ever granting actual access. Think of it like putting a fake spider in your front yard to test if the exterminator actually knows what a black widow looks like. They looked real, acted real, responded with authentic-looking system responses. But trip one, and they didn't open doors, they rang bells. Loud, silent, unmistakable bells. Bells that echoed directly into Mimir's sandbox. And Brent, oh bless his buzzwordy little heart, he activated not one, not two, 11. 11 separate dummy bypasses, all of which I'd labeled internally with cheerful names like tutorial exit node and vuln sim do not touch. But since Brent didn't bother with things like documentation or respect, he saw them in the logs, thought he'd struck digital gold, and ran straight through M like a toddler in an open field full of cow pies. The first time it happened, 3:04 a.m. of course, I just watched. He accessed a file labeled redundant auth protocol legacy and executed a shell override. It didn't break anything, didn't give him what he wanted. It just echoed, quietly, into Mimir. And from there, straight into the alert archive tagged with his credential ID, And he kept going. Over the next week, Brent treated my dummy protocols like his own personal escape hatch system. He thought he was being slick, cutting corners, bypassing permissions, sneak fixing the security infrastructure just in time for the audit, cleaning digital fingerprints with a bootleg bleach wipe. But what he really did? He lit up Mimir's sandbox like a Christmas tree duct taped to a landmine. Each bypass trigger logged the method used, timestamp, access location, and the credential that executed it. It even logged typing cadence when done from an internal terminal, because yes, I'm that level of paranoid. Brent's reads like a digital signature written in crayon and rage. And the kicker? These protocols weren't just tripping alarms in my system. They were structured to generate discrepancies, subtle but clear contradictions in audit metadata, things an external auditor might not notice unless, of course, they were handed a pattern. A set of breadcrumbs, a time frame, which I now had, 3:04 a.m., every major violation, every dummy route tripped, every fingerprint Brent left in his sleep-deprived arrogance started right there. All I had to do now was mark that timestamp in the sandbox archive. Add one final note, cross-reference protocol discrepancies from 3:04 a.m. forward. Possible breach pattern. The seed was planted. All it needed was the right pair of eyes. And the clock, it had already started ticking. It was a Tuesday, one of those weird, gray ones where time feels like it's chewing gum in the back of your skull. I hadn't checked Slack in days, not since the ceremonial exile, but I kept a burner profile alive on a private workspace, just in case. At 10:42 a.m., a message popped in. No name, no photo, just a handle I didn't recognize and a short line, "Hey, something weird's going on with audit prep." He deleted all our logs and said legal signed off. That true. I sat back in my chair, heart doing that slow, delayed thud you get when your body realizes it's about to remember why you're angry. The message wasn't just a whisper, it was a canary, and it had stopped singing. That junior engineer, God bless his overworked soul, had no idea what he'd just confirmed. Brent was panicking. He'd realized the audit was going to dig deeper than he expected, and now he was playing janitor in a data crime scene. Wiping logs, purging metadata, probably rerouting approval chains with fresh timestamps, betting no one would cross-reference systems he never bothered to understand. But the thing about amateurs cleaning up messes, they only clean what they can see. He was deleting primary system logs, trying to make it look like certain overrides never existed. Problem was, the real skeletons weren't in the front yard. They were buried in the sandbox. Mimir's shadow log, still untouched, still ticking, still time-stamped, hashed, and mirrored across a redundant cold node in Iceland. Paranoid? Maybe, but who's laughing now, Brent? I clicked into the archive folder. Each violation Brent had committed, every dummy protocol he'd triggered, every unauthorized override he'd rubber-stamped with my stolen credentials, was neatly preserved, sealed tighter than Grandma's peach jam in a bunker-grade mason jar. And all of it tied back to a single fingerprint, his. I stared at the files, each one a nail in a coffin he didn't even know he'd built. Now here's the choice most people screw up in these stories. They go for the dramatic. The confrontation, the boardroom scream, the "you'll regret underestimating me" soapbox. But me, I went quiet. I opened a secure channel with the external audit team's anonymous intake line, the one for internal whistleblowers. I'd helped write that clause, back when we were trying to impress the Series B lawyers. It guaranteed full confidentiality, protection, and immediate escalation if the submission included risk of fraud, misconduct, or data manipulation. Guess what? Ding, ding, ding. I attached the full sandbox archive, included the log hashes, biometric tag evidence, credential traceback, dummy protocol triggers, IP access history. The works. No commentary, no explanation, just a single line in the message body, cross-reference to official log set. Discrepancy begins at 3:04 a.m. date. Recommend integrity check. Then I hit send, and that was it. No fanfare, no explosion, just the click of a fuse being lit in a building made of oily rags and tax fraud. Brent thought he was scrubbing history, but all he really did was scrub away the plausible deniability. And now the audit had teeth. The conference room they used for audits was always kept just a few degrees too cold, like they wanted to keep fear fresh. I remember it well, overhead lights that hummed louder than most middle managers, and a spiderweb crack on the corner of the smartboard no one ever fixed. Classic startup ambience, half tech temple, half underfunded community theater. That morning, the audit team filed in at 9 a.m. sharp. Interns with binders, analysts with muted cardigans, and the lead partner from the firm, the one whose name only ever appeared in lawsuits and investor decks. The coup, Brent, in his infinite smugness, had already made sure pastries were arranged neatly but not too curated to look approachable. He made a joke about gluten-free being too compliant, and someone fake laughed so hard they snorted. CEO sat at the head, pale and distant. Not sick, just hollow. Like maybe he'd finally started listening to that small, awful whisper that said something was off. His gaze kept drifting to the monitor even when nothing was on it. I wasn't in that room, but Mimir was. The system didn't need me anymore. It knew what to do. At 9:15 a.m., It pinged its first passive flag, a small discrepancy between expected access logs and actual session durations from the past 7 days. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet anomaly with Brent's credentials. Buried in the fine print, wrapped in polite metadata, like a razor blade baked into a quassa. The junior auditor spotted it first, young guy named Caleb, still new enough to care, but already seasoned enough to know not to push too hard. "Excuse me," he said, flipping through a printout. "I think we're missing session logs for March 14th between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock a.m. Admin credentials were used, but there's no matching activity record." Brent waved him off with the smugness of a man who mistakes noise-canceling headphones for personality. "Oh, that's a caching issue. Our logs sometimes compress overnight, totally normal." He even winked. The room shifted. No one bought it, but no one argued. Caleb sat down, flushed, made a note, stayed quiet. But across the table, the senior partner, Miss Hale, tilted her head slightly. She didn't speak right away, just tapped her pen once against her notes like someone clocking the rhythm of a song only she could hear. Then she said, "Could I see the full log export, please? Raw format, not just summaries." Brent hesitated, smiled too long. "Oh, it's large, might take a while to generate." The lie floated across the room like a fart in a chapel. Miss Hale didn't blink. "We can wait." And wait they did. While Brent fumbled with IT, while he texted someone under the table, he stalled, deflected, tried to pivot to big picture wins. And while he danced, Mimir's next scheduled alert rolled in. Flag hash 2, conflict between dummy protocol trigger logs and claimed system integrity. Flag hash 3, timestamp mismatch on credential access. Flag hash 4, evidence of log deletion attempts, mainframe only, sandbox untouched. Each flag whispered louder than the last, not to the whole room, just to Miss Hale. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't make accusations. She just leaned back and smiled. The kind of smile that says, "We know you're lying. We just haven't decided how hard we're going to hit you yet." Brent kept sweating. CEO kept sinking. The audit that should have wrapped by noon dragged into 2 o'clock, then 3 o'clock. Then dinner was ordered, and still they waited, because the system wasn't done. Not yet, not until someone asked the question. The right question. The moment it snapped was barely a sound. Not a bang, not a gasp, just the subtle shuffle of paper sliding from one folder to another. Miss Hale had left the room 20 minutes earlier under the pretense of a routine cross-check, which is auditor speak for "I smell bullshit and I'm calling backup." She returned with a manila envelope. Thick, heavier than it should have been. Brent didn't even notice her come in. He was mid-rant about operational agility and streamlining compliance touchpoints, while the CTO pretended to find his pen very interesting. The CEO had stopped making eye contact with anyone entirely. Miss Hale sat down, smoothed the folder, didn't speak. The room hushed on instinct. She pulled out a single sheet and held it up like she was unveiling a sacred document. No drama, no throat clearing. Just this sentence, calm as a guillotine. "We've identified 217 individual overrides of core security protocols, all executed under the same admin credential. Timestamp, 3:04 a.m. Date, can you explain that?" Brent blinked. For a second, his lips parted like he was going to play it cool. Maybe say it was automated maintenance or a dev script. But then he saw the header on the page, Mimir log SBX copy. Access key, coup credential ID redacted biometric auth match. 99.7% triggered protocols. Dummy chain X1X11. Do not activate. His face drained like someone had yanked the plug on his blood supply. Nobody said a word. Miss Hale placed the sheet gently on the table, her eyes never leaving him. The junior auditor, Caleb, looked like someone had handed him the Dead Sea Scrolls and told him to fetch coffee. Across the room, the external legal rep from the VC firm quietly closed her laptop. She didn't say goodbye, just packed it into her bag and stood. She was already texting someone before she hit the door. Brent finally found his voice. It must be. There's a mistake. That log, if it's from a sandbox, it's probably not real. It's test data, not official. Anyone could have faked." Miss Hale didn't even raise an eyebrow. "The archive is verified. Time-stamped, hash-matched. Encrypted chain, pulled from a redundancy node with credential tracking. You signed off on that system's implementation last year." She tapped the second page of the printout, one Brent hadn't noticed yet. "Signature file, /compliance /init /exec /auth signatures /brentcu /approved PDF date signed. Timestamp 30 months ago." Brent's mouth opened. Closed. He reached for the printout like he might be able to smudge the ink away. His hand shook so bad the paper fluttered like a dying moth. Audit paused. Formally, Miss Hale stood. "We're halting proceedings effective immediately pending internal counsel review. We'll need to isolate your system access logs for the past 90 days and conduct interviews." The room exploded with silence. Brent didn't speak, couldn't. The CEO had both hands folded over his mouth. And the printout? It just sat there, still. Plain paper, heavy with digital blood. "I wasn't in the room, but the trap had closed, and every part of it, Brent built it. I just made sure the lights were on when it snapped. No one breathes during an audit pause. You'd think people would relax, step out, grab a coffee, pretend it's just a little hiccup in the bureaucratic ballet. But no, what really happens is silence turns radioactive. Everyone starts running private calculations in their heads. What did I sign? What did I forward? What Slack reaction might now be a subpoena exhibit? The room was locked in that state when Miss Hale walked back in. No binder this time, just one sheet of paper, folded once like a letter from Death himself. She didn't speak right away, just stood at the head of the table, eyes scanning the row of executives like she was counting the guilty before she declared the crime. Then she held up the page. No theatrics, no intro, just one line. Read clearly enough to make the HVAC unit hesitate. Your admin access key was used to bypass 217 security protocols at 3:04 a.m. on the night redacted was offboarded. Why? Brent's mouth opened like he'd been slapped in a dream. No sound came out at first, just air and panic. Well, I wasn't the only one with access. That key, it was probably legacy routing, or maybe DevOps testing. His voice cracked halfway through DevOps, like even his vocal cords didn't buy it. CEO looked like someone had just handed him a bucket of warm roadkill. Not surprised, not shocked, just hollow. Staring at the printout with the distant gaze of a man realizing the thing he bet his career on had termites. The VC rep, the one who flew in just for this meeting and hadn't said a single word all day, he closed his laptop. Slowly. Didn't even wait for Brent to finish squirming. Just pushed his chair back, stood and said, "We'll be reevaluating our participation. Please direct any further communication to our legal office." That was it. One sentence and the oxygen left the room. Brent tried again, flailing like a bureaucratic fish on a hook. "I didn't mean to override anything. It was late, and we were prepping for the audit, and there were permissions that hadn't been updated yet, so I..." Miss Hale cut him off with a hand gesture, like a conductor stopping the noise before it became music. "The credentials used were yours. The protocols bypassed were dummy routes flagged for audit training. The time of access matches the hour your former head of compliance was being terminated. The system logs indicate not only intentional entry, but biometric match and signature trail. Nothing was automated, nothing was inherited, and nothing was authorized." Brent blinked rapidly. Sweat darkened his collar. The back of his neck was blotchy red, like his bloodstream was starting to regret its career choices. Then came the soft knock at the door. Legal. In-house counsel, flanked by the company's risk advisor, both looking like they'd aged 5 years during the pause. They didn't ask for a recap, just walked in, scanned the table, and sat down without speaking. Miss Hale stepped back. Her job wasn't to prosecute, just to present the blade. And now it had been swung. Everything stopped. The meeting didn't end, it just froze. People got up slowly, like leaving a funeral. Brent sat slumped in his chair, hands limp, lips moving but forming nothing useful. CEO finally spoke, almost to himself. "Why'd you even use her credentials?" Brent didn't answer. But somewhere across the city, in a quiet apartment with the blinds drawn and the tea kettle whistling, I already knew the answer because Brent didn't know how not to cheat, and I built a system where cheating meant confessing. Brent's last stand came in the form of corporate improv. "Okay, look, maybe it wasn't me. Maybe someone in IT spoofed my credentials during maintenance. We do a lot of after-hours testing. It could have been a timing error, a false positive." His voice was too loud, too fast, like he thought if he said enough words, some of them might turn into an escape hatch. The auditors didn't flinch. Miss Hale tapped her pen once on the desk and nodded toward the associate beside her. He slid a second printout across the table, this one heavier. 2 pages stapled at the corner, the top page marked in red. Brent didn't reach for it. He just stared like the paper might catch fire if he made eye contact. Miss Hale folded her hands. "This is a snapshot from the biometric authentication log. It confirms retinal match at the terminal in the executive suite, 3:04 a.m. Your key, your access, your fingerprint. Signed audit override request embedded in the dummy protocol's flag trigger. No other logins at that time, no IT personnel present, no maintenance ticket filed." The words weren't loud, but they rang like bells. Brent's hand twitched on the table, just once. Little tremor that traveled from his fingers to his wrist, like his body was trying to disconnect from the moment. That shake, that was the exact second he realized there was no version of the truth where he came out clean. The CEO didn't look at him. The CTO quietly collected his notebook and muttered something about a systems review. Legal didn't even bother asking questions, just opened a binder and started reading silently like Brent was already a footnote. He tried to speak again. Nothing came out, because there's a limit to how many times you can lie before your body starts choking on the taste. No one yelled, no one stood, no threats, no tantrums, just the brutal stillness of consequences arriving on schedule. And me? I was on my couch. Same hoodie, same tea mug I'd had for 5 years, the one with the chipped rim and the passive-aggressive HR quote. "We're all one big family." The kettle hissed gently behind me as my phone lit up with a push notification from a finance app. "Alert, company stock temporarily halted. Pending material disclosure." I refreshed the news. Nothing public yet, but the internal memo had leaked. Somewhere between the auditors and the investors, it found its way into the bloodstream. Whispers first, then questions, then panic. All traced back to one line in the sandbox archive. One timestamp. one admin key. One man who thought I was just a speed bump on his way to a bonus. I took a slow sip of tea. Let it burn just a little. Let it settle. I never raised my voice. Never stormed a boardroom. Never said a damn word after they fired me. I didn't have to. The system I built, just like Brent wanted, spoke volumes. And when it did, it told my story. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.